over to you.
Hi. Hey everyone, it's good to see you and thanks for joining this evening. So I don't know if everyone can see my screen, but
yes, we can see your screen.
Right. But what I wanted to talk to you about today, and thank you, Roshi, for the lovely introduction, but what I wanted to talk about today and this evening is something that I spent many years trying to sort through as a new entrepreneur, specifically in the ESL space. So there's so many components to what it means to run a business. The first thing that I wanted to share with you, though, is that this is only my perspective. There are so many other ways to do this, but I'm coming from a place of having kind of tried everything without really having a lot of mentors until now. And this is kind of a retrospective of all of the things that I learned and all the things that I wish I had known when I was first getting started out as a new ESL instructor, trying to build my own practice. So what we're going to be talking about, let me see, how do I change? There we go. What we're going to be talking about, I'll do a quick intro about myself to set the stage. Then we're going to talk about 4 areas of how to really think about building your own practice. So this webinar is not necessarily about how to build a big business. That is a great other webinar, but this is about how can you really independently and without a lot of experience perhaps, or maybe without a lot of knowledge yet, build a practice that gets you noticed, that gets you good, meaningful work, and that helps you develop and establish yourself in the world of ESL instruction. And I know right now that's something that's on everyone's mind. We're going to be talking about brand and whatever that means. We're going to be talking about how you can actually define what you do, what to say yes to and what to say no to, and some of my stories. We're going to be talking about pricing, which is a super important component of a business, and some do's and some don'ts. And we'll also be talking about promotion, which is something that we've been really successful at. And I'm happy to share everything that I've learned specifically on social media, actually, which was something that, by the way, I used to be terrible at. So we're going to get started first by setting the stage a little bit. So a little bit about me. As Roshi said, I'm the CEO and co-founder of a company that's called Opus. What we do is we train deskless, or employees who don't sit at a desk all day. And we do that by training them over text message. The origins of this company are actually in my first company, which was called ESL Works, which we're going to talk about a lot this evening. ESL Works was a service that taught English training in New York City kitchens. It was really successful for 5 years. And then we made the decision to expand the business. And that was when we built a software platform to deliver training over text message. I'm not going to go into the whole story today of how that evolved. That's a whole other webinar. But just to give you a scope that even though I run Opus now, I'm coming from a background of a lot of ESL instruction, a lot of services-based training. So something that wasn't just delivered over a computer. My background is I'm native to Kansas City. I lived in Charleston, South Carolina for a while. And then now I've been in New York for over 10 years. And most of my background, like many ESL instructors, is actually not in ESL. So I started my career in restaurants. I spent my whole life working in restaurants, actually, since I was 14 years old. In Kansas, they let you work when you're 14 years old. And really spent my whole life trying to get out of restaurants. It's a really difficult industry to work in. You're underpaid, you're overworked. But I always found I felt like I fit in. I felt like it worked for me whenever I had an opportunity to train someone. So a lot of my expertise in restaurants came about through training and how to teach people really quickly in very demanding jobs how to do something. It could have been something as simple as, here's how you slice an onion, to something more complex, which is here's how you close the store at night. But here's where the ESL part came in. That for those of you who haven't worked in the restaurant industry, over 25% of the workforce doesn't speak English as a first language. And so in every place that I worked, I would always encounter colleagues who didn't speak English and who also wanted to learn English, but didn't have access to classes. It wasn't because there was a lack of classes. We all live in New York. We know that ESL schools are everywhere, but they couldn't access them. They had kids and they had commutes and they had second and third jobs. There were education barriers. It's all of the things that we see in ESL. So what I did is I had spent all of these years working in management and operations positions in restaurants, and I started to incorporate more ESL training into the work that I did. So I started to tutor ESL on the side, and in every training manual that I built, I incorporated some sort of language instruction. And that's actually when the idea was brought about. That's also when I met Leslie and I started to earn my certificate in teaching English from the New School. So that was over 5 years ago today now, I think. So just to sort of recap that timeline, I only shared the first part, but basically I worked in restaurants. Then while I was working in restaurants, I became a freelance ESL instructor. So I basically worked for myself on the weekends. And from there, because things became so popular, I started to think about ways to build a business, which I know is why all of you are here today. But my business, all I wanted was to promote myself. I thought, well, I have something good here. I have restaurant experience and I'm certified to teach English as a second language. I've been doing it for a really long time. I want to be the person, the woman who teaches ESL in kitchens in New York. That was the big idea. But what I decided to do is to put a name behind it. So, which by the way, you should think about doing. If you're building a practice that is just you, there's no problem, there's no issue at all if you think about actually putting a name to it, building a brand behind it. It's because I built that name and that brand called ESL Works that I started to attract more business, which we're going to talk about. And I had to hire teachers. So things got a lot bigger. We're not going to dig too much into that tonight. Then after that, we wanted to get even bigger. So this was about a year ago. We developed a platform that delivers English training over text message. Then COVID happened. And as we all know, all businesses around the world shut down. It also meant that no businesses wanted English training at the time. So we ended up expanding our platform to provide all kinds of training in addition to English training over text message. So that's when Opus was born. We still are a top provider of English training in kitchens in the United States, but we've also added other types of training. So think about workplace safety and food safety and customer service training. We kind of do it all now, and we do it all over text message. So what I want to do is move on to brand. This is something that I never understood early on. And you should not feel ashamed if you don't quite understand what brand is. But basically brand, what I learned over the years is that brand is basically how the world sees you. It's not necessarily as simple as the mission and the vision of your practice, of what you're doing. It's really about how you're presenting yourself and your practice to the world. And it really seeks to answer 3 questions, which if you're thinking about building a practice now, this is, I think, something that you can go home and you can do tonight. Spend 30 minutes really thinking about what you want to be building and who you're serving. And then from there, you're going to have a really nice foundation for how to start to promote what your practice is. You can't start promoting anything until you have a really good understanding of what it is that you're promoting. So I'm going to repeat that because it's really important. You cannot start to promote your practice until you know what it is you're promoting. So what that means is that the first thing you have to know is, why does your service actually exist? Why do you exist in the world today? So I've met ESL instructors who are focused on teaching in meat plants, right? So they only go and they work for like Tyson Foods, and they go in and they teach classes specifically to folks there. And so all of their curricula is focused on that particular use case. I've met ESL instructors who have stopped teaching completely, and they said, you know what? The problem that I'm trying to solve right now is that teachers are tired and they don't want to go home and develop their own materials. So I'm going to develop great materials to support instructors. That's an idea too. So when you're thinking about why your service, why your skill exists, think about who it is that you're serving, and what problem you're trying to solve. What you shouldn't do in this exercise is you should not be thinking about every problem that you can solve, because you can't solve everything. You just can't, because you're not Google, and even Google isn't solving everything. So the smartest thing you can possibly do is think about the one problem that you know you can solve really beautifully in the world of ESL. And typically, as we all know in ESL, in TESOL, it goes into a few buckets. It could be instructional design. It can be generating materials, so like making videos. It can also be actually teaching, or it can be consulting. So just giving advice to businesses on how they might want to deploy an ESL program. Then you need to think about 3 brand values. And I'm going to show you an example of this in a minute. But basically what this is like, if anyone ever talks about your practice, what are the 3 words that you want them to say about it? I think that's the easiest thing to compliment it. It doesn't have to be 3, it can be 5. I think 3 is a nice, easy number. Do you want people to talk about, Leslie's ESL practice as something that is smart and fun and simple, or something that is serious and focused on, the highest level of professional development and, specific to each employee or each user? You can really drill down your brand by just thinking about the 3 words that anybody could use to describe you. And then here's the thing that a lot of people don't think about, and I didn't think about enough. Think about who you're competing with. And I'm not saying that you're going to go and like get in a fight with them, but there's a lot of other ESL instructors out there, a lot. And it doesn't mean that there isn't space for everyone, because there is. We have competitors at Opus, but you have to think about who you're competing with, because you have to think about how you make yourself look different. Why, for example, if you are going to teach at, for like Goldman Sachs, teach English at the corporate level, why are you better than the next teacher that they interview? And so if you know what the map is, if you know what people are, what other instructors are out there, who are some of the best ones, who has the best social media following, then you can actually get a sample of how you can kind of position yourself. Oh, this person is like really active on LinkedIn. They don't do anything on Instagram. We have identical services. I should probably be on LinkedIn and not really care about Instagram. You can also think about competition in other ways, which we'll get into in a minute. So I'm actually showing you now what we did at my company at Opus when we decided to start teaching training over text message. When we shifted to that new model, we really needed to go back to the beginning and say, why do we exist in the first place? And we knew that one thing was really important. You can see on this slide, everything that we did was going to be about frontline workers. It was not going to be about the people who were sitting in offices all day. It wasn't going to be about anybody else except employees that were out on the field who wanted access to good training. It really became so clear when we did this exercise, and it doesn't take that long to really understand why it is you're doing what you're doing. And if you see this little target that I made on the left, what happens when you know why you exist is you can actually talk more clearly about how you do it and what it is that helps you do it. So for us, we exist to bring the frontline forward and to create space for everyone at work, right? So we're focused on this frontline team. We do that by delivering training over text message. And so automatically the how sort of falls into place. Those core values I was talking about, this is the actual exercise that we went through. You can do this on your own. You can do this with a friend who can kind of help you talk through it. It's really fun. Just pull a whole bunch of Post-it notes and write down all of the words that describe you and describe the kind of teacher you are and the kind of writer you are and the kind of person you are in the world. And then you're going to rank them. So you're going to say, okay, these are the ones that are really the most important. These are the second most important, and these are the third. And by breaking those out, you can actually begin to identify what are the 3 words that really are going to describe you and your company well. What's interesting, and I will share this, these things change over time. So the things that were in the first column, we actually scratched those, and now we're much more in the second column. So accessibility, inclusivity, and creating space are the 3 words that describe us. And don't be afraid to cling to those words and really own them. Use them when you're talking about yourself. Use them when you're talking about your practice. And this, when I talk about competition, it does not have to be complicated at all, I promise. This is me on a sketch, on the train, writing out how we sort of fit into the landscape of learning management systems, which is who we compete with. So, so when you're thinking about competition, spend a half hour doing some Google searches, write a big old list of people and different schools maybe that you're thinking about who are in the same space as you, and just make sure you know kind of where you fit on that map. So all of this matters because you are your brand when you are starting your practice. Everything that you do is about you and your face and how you present yourself to the world. So you really need to be thinking about your practice as you. And don't be shy. You wouldn't know it on this webinar, but I'm a huge introvert. And so I was really nervous to kind of put myself forward at the start of ESL Works and say, hey, I'm an experienced teacher. I'm really good at this. I've been in restaurants forever. But the more I promoted myself, more than ESL Works, the more that ESL Works started to grow. So think about all of these like big tech CEOs, right? They started by just promoting themselves over the broader company. Think about universities and how deans represent those universities. So having a person behind a brand is really important, and it's you. So don't be shy. So when you're talking about your service, this is what we're going to talk about next, is what's the thing that you're actually going to do. We actually aren't going to go too far into this because it's pretty simple, actually. The first advice I have here, and I'll go into the details of ESL Works, is to choose your service and to stick with it. This relates to promoting your service also, right? So if you say that you do not create curriculum, then own it. It's actually going to make it much simpler for people to say yes to you if they know that you do this and you don't do that. So I gave some examples here of services that you should encourage yourself to have some restraint and decide what's the pathway I want to go down to. Am I a tutor? Am I opening a school, whether it's online or in person? Am I an independent instructor, which is what I was at ESL Works for a long time? Or am I a designer? Am I the man or the woman behind the curtain who's helping to create curriculum? There's a huge market for that, by the way, especially in the LMS world. But it's so important to stick to this so that you can actually better promote yourself more clearly. The second most important bullet point, when you are running a service, which means you're running a service that requires humans to run it, you should be charging for everything. You should not be giving away anything for free. I will explain one scenario in which it's great to give away everything for free. But when it comes to running a school, for example, you would think about charging for materials. You would be charging for the space that you're renting. You would be charging for your time. You would be charging for any teachers or contractors who you're working with. You should charge for all of that. You should charge for the meetings that you take with people. The reason why this is important is because it gives you an opportunity to actually give people deals. So we do this at Opus. We used to do it at ESL Works, where we would say, hey, we normally charge $500 for an initial consulting meeting where we give you advice on what we think is best. But we're going to give this away to you for free because Leslie referred you. So what you're doing is you're giving permission to charge for those other services. And at the end of the day, like, it's okay if you give away one meeting for free, but as long as people know that you are like charging for your time, it gives you some wiggle room to negotiate some of those costs. The last thing, and somebody was asking about LMS in the chat I saw, is to leverage technology where you can. It's 2021. We are not encountering, well, there's some Y2K technology still out there that's kind of clunky, but there's a lot of good technology that can help you run your practice more efficiently. You don't have to do everything on pen and paper. You also don't have to do everything on Google Docs. There's a lot of great website building tools that you can use for free or at a very low cost. So Squarespace is a really great place to build your own website. That's what we ran on for 5 years until we got our own designers. And what Squarespace can do is help you collect contact information from anybody who's interested in working with you. It can help you share more about your practice. You can put a blog on there. But that level of technology is, while it's simple, is actually incredibly important to be leveraging for your practice. Use LinkedIn, we're going to talk about that. Use YouTube as much as you can. YouTube is a really great tool that a lot of people, I think, underutilize in their practice. You should be using that for promotional videos. YouTube has more subscribers than most social media platforms. And it's for good reason. It's because most people consume video content. And then text message, use text message to chat with your students, use it to chat with your potential customers or potential clients. I did this all the time. And everybody here texts, right? So the statistic I share with everyone is that for every 1 email user, there are 2.5 cell phone users. So think about that and the fact that even the people who you're trying to like provide services to, those potential clients, they're using text. So my recommendation is that when you're in an initial meeting with somebody, say, hey, listen, if it's easiest, I can just text you, the answer to that question once I get back to the office. Or why don't I check in with you in a couple of days with your cell phone? I know that that's easier than email. So by actually leveraging text message with your students as well as your clients, you're going to build a really strong bond with them. So here's what we, based on everything I just shared, choose your service, charge for everything, and leverage technology. This is what we did at ESL Works. We were an ESP services business for restaurants. That was it. We didn't do anything else. So we got calls from manufacturing facilities. We said no. We got calls out of state. We said no. We got calls just to develop curriculum and sell it. We said no. It's really hard to say no, but the more you say no, the more that people know exactly who you are and the more people who will come to you to buy your services. What happens when you say yes to everything is that you dilute your time too much and you're not able to actually focus on growing your practice. So, that was what came first, is we made the decision, this is what we do, and this is, and everything else we're just not going to do right now. For us, everything we charged for, so we came up with a price, it was $1,000 per class. And what that included costs like setup, materials, prep, travel, instruction, student time, and student evaluations. And we made it really transparent to customers. This is what is included in that cost. It's enough for us to pay our teachers really well. And it's also, you're also getting some of the best curriculum out there for ESL in restaurants. And then all that technology I was talking about, this is what we used. So we used a Squarespace website. I set up a LinkedIn profile for myself. I set up a LinkedIn business page for ESL Works. You can all do this for yourselves if you set up a website. And then here's the trick. We're not going to go too far into social media, but we were actually on every single social media platform out there. Not all of them worked, but it's good for you to test what areas work and what don't. So I want to talk about pricing really quickly. This is always the question on everyone's mind, and I have a few pointers for everyone. So once you've thought about what service you're selling, it's really hard to figure out how much to charge for it. So I'm not going to say that there's a magic number. There's literally no magic number for what you charge, but there's a few tips for how to land on a number that feels good and that also ensures that you are making a good living and that you are able to pay rent and eat food and go out with friends and live the life that you would like to live. So the first thing I'm going to share here is that there are no off-the-shelf solutions or no off-the-shelf pricing to pull from for services businesses. You really have to base it off of your own experience. What I did as a pointer, so at the time, I was leaving my current job, right? And I think at the time I was making, this is a while back, so I was probably making like $55,000 or $60,000 a year. So here's the trick, if you literally don't know anything on what to charge. I took my salary at the time, I divided it by 52 weeks. I divided that by 40 hours a week, so I knew what my hourly rate was. And then I took that and I doubled it. So I think it landed up to like $60 or $70 an hour, I can't remember. That's where I started. And so when I started to teach very early on as an independent contractor, I said, I charge $70 an hour. I had no idea, but it was a good way for me to ensure that I would be making definitely the salary that I had started with and that I was comfortable with. And then I was making a guess as to how much the business was going to cost me. I wasn't sure. I was just starting out and I had one customer with one class. So it was really hard to know what it looked like on a broader scale. So here's the second tip. Remember when I talked about those competitors? So your competitors are pricing the way that they are for a reason. So your competitors might be more established than you. Try to figure out why they're charging that. And so some people list it on their website. Sometimes you can find out from a friend or from another company what they're charging. My biggest takeaway from this slide, and everybody should write this down, any conversation you have with a potential customer or a potential client, you need to ask them this question. What other instructors are you talking to right now? It is a perfectly reasonable question to ask. And half the time they're going to say, well, no one, we just found you and we love you. The other half of the time, they're going to list the people that they're talking with. That's a great opportunity for you to learn who else is out on the market. Could be somebody that you potentially partner with one day even, right? So ask that question. And it's also going to give you a sense of where your, potentially what the pricing looks like. I remember in Opus, for us, to give you an example, like we're pretty big now, but we still struggle with pricing. It's really hard to figure out. So don't fret if you can't figure it out right away, but do make sure that you are paying attention and that you're always looking for opportunities to raise your prices. Because I saw Leslie leave this in the chat, most people don't charge enough. So let's talk a little bit about what those models, there's something that I never understood early on when I was teaching, and it's that there are different pricing models that you can be following. It doesn't just have to be an hourly rate. So there are subscription models that work for some people. There are flat annual rates that people charge. You can charge by keeping yourself on retainer with the company. So maybe you charge a flat $2,000 a month to just be on call with the company for up to a certain amount of hours. You can charge a flat rate for a class, which is what we landed on. So we basically did all the math and we said, okay, this is how much a class costs, and we're going to double it. And that's how we landed on that number. But my biggest recommendation for any pricing model is keep it simple. People will lose trust in you if you don't keep your pricing transparent and simple. So whenever you're sending invoices out to people, you should be outlining what exactly they're paying for, and make sure that they know that you're available if they have any questions. You can lose customers by not being transparent about your pricing and by not by keeping it really simple. So the fourth thing I wanted to share is something I was mentioning earlier. So remember when I was talking about how you're going to be charging double for everything, and you're really going to keep trying to raise your prices? That's really important, because I promise all of you, if you all shared what your rate is now, I would tell you to double it. When you are promoting yourself, your best, your champions and your advocates are going to be your customers. So a tactic that you can use, something that we did quite often at ESL Works, is we charged our first 3 customers at cost. So we didn't make a profit off of them. We didn't double anything. We just said, we're just gonna, and we were clear with them. We said, we're just gonna charge you what it costs us. We did that because we needed the names, right? We wanted these important customers that could help show that we had business and that we were open for business. But we made sure that we asked for something in return. So what we did is we said, listen, if we charge you at cost, we would like a testimonial from your CEO that we can put on our website and that we can share out with the rest of the world. And we also want to write a case study on your class, because you have a really interesting population of folks from the Dominican Republic who we think it could be important to write about, or you have a lot of women who are working in this class and we think it's important to report on that. Make sure that you're asking for some piece of some testimonial or some asset that's going to help promote your business even further. When this happens, it's pretty magical. The biggest, and this is, if there's anything I can encourage you to take away from pricing, it's like, give a good deal to the people who you know are going to promote you and will support you a long way. And you don't necessarily have to charge at cost, but offer something that is going to show, hey, like we want to kind of cut costs for you, but we're a growing business as well, and we would really love it if you would support us by speaking at this next event. Or every time that you see another business, would you mind shouting our name once? It's going to be helpful. And I'm going to emphasize this one more time. Figure out what you're worth and then double it. It's the easiest way to start. And customers are not going to turn you down just because you're charging a little bit more than the next person down the street. They're going to turn you down if you can't justify the value of what you're bringing to the table. So be confident about what services you can provide, deliver on them really, really well, and make sure that you're charging for it. Most of the time, also another reason to be charging more is that there's so many things that you just forget to expense, especially early on. And so this is a good way to ensure that all of your expenses are covered. So you've done all of this, all of these parts, right? Like the first thing that you did is you thought about, okay, what's my brand? What's my service? Why am I here? Why am I doing this thing? Then you're thinking about the actual service and what it is that you provide, and also what it is you don't provide. Then you're going to be thinking about what your cost structure might be. By the way, you're not going to get it right at all times. Now it's time to start thinking about promotion. And this is where I think I can be most helpful today. One, when you're thinking about promotion, Neil, I see your question. I can answer that in a minute. So the one thing to think about when you're promoting, and Neil, you should take a look at this slide. Even if you're an individual who is promoting to other individuals, they are looking for instructors on Google. Everyone is looking on Google. You are competing with Google Ads. So being online and having an online presence is really important. An individual who is looking for an ESL instructor is going to go to Google before they do anything else. And so it's really important to think about how you want to live in the internet and how people can discover you. If you're not a big social media person, that's okay. There's other ways to present yourself, but it's pretty hard to build a business without having some sort of online presence. Once you have an online presence, you're going to get a lot of business through referrals, right? Neil, that one person who you're an instructor for is going to tell their next buddy. Which is one way to promote too. You can say, hey, if I teach you this one class, would you tell 10 friends about us? But the problem with Google Ads is that it's really getting pretty bad. So every time someone does a search, anyone who's paying for advertising is gonna kind of go at the top of the queue. So that's why we're gonna talk about LinkedIn for a little bit. The first thing that you can do, and I would see even tonight, if you're like, oh, that woman, Rachel, I don't even want to do my brand exercise tonight, then don't do it. The best gift you can give yourself tonight is go to LinkedIn and change your LinkedIn profile and make sure that it is optimal for being an ESL instructor. Make sure that your photo is crisp and that you look professional in it. Make sure that you are listing your skills in that top header. So you see here, I'm gonna share my actual LinkedIn with you so you can see it, and we're gonna run through it. Okay, here is Rachel's LinkedIn profile. And mind you, it wasn't always this way. So on my LinkedIn profile, I have not only listed my role, CEO and co-founder at Opus, I have also explained what our company does. And if you worked for a great employer before, then you should be writing who that employer is in your header up here. This is not something that's automated by LinkedIn. It's actually something that you can create. With this little pencil up here, I can edit all of this headline detail right here to whatever I want. So just listing your current position is not going to help you on LinkedIn. You should say something crisp and clear. It could be, so Neil, your example, it could be private instructor for students, in the Manhattan area, or private ESL instructor for students in the Manhattan area. Put it up top in your headline. And we all know why this is important. It's because people don't read. If there's one thing they're going to read, it's your headline. So make sure that you're describing exactly what it is that you do beyond just the job title. The second thing that you're going to do here is you're going to fill out your about section. This is really important. So you can see how I did this. And we'll go into edit here. So this is just a blank text box. You can kind of do whatever you want in it. I talked about my background. I talked about the company. I talked about what problem we're trying to solve. And then I just listed everything that I'm an expert in. So you know that in LinkedIn, they have this little skills section down here that's like nearly invisible, right? You can't really, nobody looks at this anymore. So make sure that you're putting those skills way up top here. This is where people are going to read about you. Maybe you're an expert in ESP, maybe you speak Mandarin fluently, whatever that is, make sure you're putting it up top. The next is my experience. So you should not only be putting the job title, but you should also put a quick description of what you did at the job. And if there are any relevant articles pertaining to that job, then go ahead and put them in here. It doesn't have to be an article about you. It can be about the business that you worked in. So maybe you're really proud that you taught English training to pilots at American Airlines. Put an article about American Airlines up here, something that's going to give you some legitimacy to the work that you did. I did that for all of my experience, and then in the things that were just earlier on, I just made it really simple for people to read through. I really emphasized the two kind of top big jobs that I was focused on. The last thing I'm going to add here is that something that looks very good on LinkedIn is when you have more than 500 connections. It sounds ridiculous. I thought it sounded ridiculous at the time, but you see here where it says 500 plus connections. I now have about 3,500, but at the time, but no matter what, if you are showing that you have more than 500 connections, it's very appealing to people who are looking for instructors because it means you have a network. It means you're legitimate. It means you know people. The easiest way, if you aren't at 500 yet, the nice thing about LinkedIn is they give you suggestions for people to connect with. Just start clicking, start connecting with people. This is exactly the same as following someone on Instagram. Connecting with people is as simple as clicking a button and hoping that they'll accept the invitation. It does not mean you need to send them a message. It does not mean you need to do anything. The nice thing about LinkedIn is that this is about you and your network and all the other people who are in that network. So we're in the business of restaurants still, which means that like connecting with Rose Noel at Mylene Omer, I haven't met this chef before, but she's still in my network, so I connected with her. And here's why that's important also, is that anytime that you're on LinkedIn, you should be connecting with people and you should also be posting something on LinkedIn. So going back to our slides, which we'll do in a minute, I'm going to share with you a little bit more about what it means to be active on LinkedIn. I'm sharing this because if I do a quick search for ESL instructor in LinkedIn, and I'm an employer maybe who's looking for someone, or if I'm Joe Schmo down the street who's looking for an ESL instructor, LinkedIn is a job board. People are looking for experienced individuals on LinkedIn. And you can see here, it's sorted by jobs, people, and groups. So when somebody's looking for an ESL instructor, this is the first thing they're doing. So as long as you have those words in your LinkedIn profile, you're going to be noticed in these searches. But people aren't going to think that you're going to respond to them unless you're posting on LinkedIn. So what you can do, and I'll kind of show you some of the things that I posted today, once a day, just once a day, post a little something about what you do, something that you learned. So a lot of the things that I post on LinkedIn are about running a business. I post a lot about ESL. I post about my family's history because we all worked in restaurants. Share more about yourself. It's free and it's so easy. And all of those people you just connected with, they're also following you automatically on LinkedIn, which means they're going to see your post and they're going to like your post. So here's a post that I made today because we joined a special business council and all of these people liked my post. That's because they're seeing me post every day and they know that I'm active on LinkedIn. So I'm going to go back to our deck so we can wrap up here. Here we are. So becoming active on LinkedIn, like I mentioned, is post every morning on LinkedIn, show that you're an expert. I started posting on LinkedIn at ESL Works before I had a website. So LinkedIn is your best free website to show your stuff and to show who you are. Once you're ready, go to squarespace.com. They don't pay me to say this. Go to squarespace.com and start to build your website. It's very easy. They have a million great templates. It's very hard to mess up. And you can build a short, small website about the work that you're doing. They're also going to help you get a URL, which is the web address too. So maybe it could be your name. Maybe it could be the name of the company that you're building. I found out very early on that my website was my best employee. When I didn't have anyone else to help me, my website was doing the work. So when I didn't have time to go and speak at an event or go to some networking event to chat with other ESL teachers, I knew that my website was still working. What that meant was that about once a month, I'd go back to the website and I'd say, okay, is there anything I need to change? Do I need to add something new to this so that it can represent me better? Once you're ready to, once you have that foundational website, the last piece here is to start writing more. You're all ESL teachers, which means that you're all very familiar with writing. We all write all the time. So write about ESL, write about your students, write about what it means to write lessons. Do whatever feels good. There's really no wrong way to start a blog. And a blog, by the way, is just a series of different little essays that you write. But the beauty of this is that a blog is going to help you in those Google searches. So when people are searching through and they say search ESL instructors NYC, the odds of your website and your name going to the top are a little bit higher. And also it's a good way for any person who's going to your website to see that you're legitimate and that you're active, and they can read more about your brand and what you represent and what you stand for, which is important, especially if, since you're kind of trying to differentiate yourself from the world out there. And then to sort of wrap up here, the social media aspect, which by the way, took me years to figure out. I think that the easiest way is to just start on every platform. That's what we did. We actually started before there was TikTok and Snapchat, but we had an Instagram, and the Instagram posted photos from class with student permission. We had a Twitter account that really had the same exact things we posted on Instagram. I just showed you LinkedIn. I was also on Reddit and Quora. So I was on those platforms answering questions about ESL. Reddit and Quora are basically these big web forums where people ask and answer questions. And it's a great way to get yourself in there, present yourself as an expert, meet new people, and network even more. You all know a lot about ESL. You should be sharing it with the world, and Reddit and Quora are a great way. Facebook should be listed. I just forgot to list it. Facebook is fine too. It's still very effective, and we still use it a lot at Opus. So I've gone through a lot of information, but at the end of the day, no matter what and when you're promoting yourself, just remember to stick to your values and to stick to the service that you offer, and don't get distracted if Daisy down the street is doing something really cool. That might be the case, but you're at risk of not building your own practice if you get distracted by what she's building and trying to do that. Pay attention, talk to her, but really stick to the things that you believe in. Building a niche practice is what I found was most successful, and I would recommend that for anybody. So if you have a specific area of expertise, then run with it. I have friends who are ESL instructors for actors and actresses. I have other friends who are just only behind the scenes and only writing ESL content for learning management systems. So you can do a lot. Just make sure you stick with one goal. All All right, we can open it up to questions now, if that sounds good, Rashi.
Yeah, hi, I'm so happy. Oh, thank you. That's so brilliant. I learned so much just by listening to you. I'm sure we all did. So there's a couple of questions in here. I'm sure you can see this. Let me just go up here. What way do you prefer for follow-up questions? Neil's asking. Neil, do you want to explain that? What way do you prefer for follow-up questions? I don't know if that means a social media question or. Okay, we can go to another question. Rachel, can you hear me?
Yeah.
Yeah. So how can you figure out what's your at cost if you're a newbie? Things like internet cost, time, and what else possibly? Things you haven't thought of.
Yeah, great question. So for me, it was a lot of just paying attention to my day. So I started, because when you're an ESL instructor, you're trying to find parts in your day to get the work done, because most of the time you have a full-time job. So I was paying attention. I just had a little notebook and I would say, okay, I'm taking the train. That's $2.75. I'm grabbing lunch between meetings. That's $10. So anything that's connected to the job that you're doing, just take out a notepad and write it down and be really religious about it for a couple of days, and you'll be able to come up with some good categories. When you're thinking about things like internet, it's a good question for an accountant, but typically I just split it in half. I figured, well, half of the internet that I use at my house is for myself and half is for the business. So that was an easy way to think about it.
That's pretty cool. You keep everything so simple. So that's what I love about this presentation.
It really can be super simple, I promise.
A lot of us out there trying to think of ways to, do exactly what you do, but we get so bogged down by, oh my God, this is so difficult. Look at what the other person is doing and stuff like that. So really important. So Anita has a question. Did you use an email list to build your business? I'm a part-time writer, novelist, poet. I have a website, blog, email list that grows each month, but I'm wondering whether it would be necessary in the same way as a service-oriented entrepreneur.
Yes. If you have an email list, you should use it. So one thing that I did pretty early on, do you remember when I was talking about that blog that I wrote? I took all of those blogs, and every time I wrote a blog, I sent out an email with the new blog post to everybody. So they all knew that I was active and I was writing. If there's ever news about your company, then Anita, you're doing a great job. You should keep doing it. The only advice I want to give you here is, and everyone should remember this, marketing takes time. So it really does. It takes time. So Anita, be consistent. If you send a newsletter every week, make sure you send it every week. Don't get downhearted if for a couple of weeks people don't read your emails. It's okay. But make sure that you're always there. We all get a million emails a day. So I never take offense if people don't read my emails. Just be consistent. So if you decide that you want to use your email list and email people, keep doing it and they're going to come around.
Thank you. So Mike had a question. What's the difference between a tutor, in your opinion, and an independent instructor?
So personally, I'm actually curious to hear what you have to say. Personally, I think that a tutor is someone who's doing private instruction for one student consistently, but they're not teaching a class. So tutors do not typically prepare a full lesson. Instead, they're actually taking a look at what does the student already have and how can I contribute to that? Right. Versus an independent instructor who's kind of burdened with needing to write all of the materials. You can also charge more if you're an independent instructor.
I tend to agree with you. Absolutely. It's more like freelance work that you keep doing. Yes.
Yeah.
So Howji has a question. How much time and how frequently do you spend updating all your accounts on social media platforms for your company? Because it does seem a lot, you know, you covered all the different social media platforms. You said you do every day a post or
Yep, every day for well, now we're bigger, so now it's the first 2 hours a day, but I used to spend an hour a day.
an hour a day.
An hour a day. But remember, you're competing with Google here, so no one's going to know about you unless you put in the time, and it's worth it because people are going to pay attention to that. What's the first thing that you do when you think about signing on with a new business? Or maybe, you know, you're looking for a master's degree and you're looking at the new school and you think, maybe I want to go there. Well, you're going to go to their website. And then you're going to scroll all the way to the bottom and you're going to look at their Twitter account and their Instagram account and their LinkedIn account. People are doing that with you too. Right. And what you're looking for is to make sure that they're legitimate and to make sure that their brand and their values align with what you want. So I would say to start, and you don't have to do all of the platforms at once. I ended up doing it because I wanted to see which ones were effective for us. But to start, dedicate an hour in the morning to doing it, or an hour in the evening. If you can't fill that time, then write your blog post and post it on LinkedIn. They're both very effective.
Thank you. That's a very great answer. Thank you so much. I had a question. You know, you mentioned texting, and even at the bottom of your email, it's like, text me, really text me. And I was like, oh my God. She's one of the few people who actually says that, you know, people like,
I mean it. And you
mean it, right? It comes across so well. So my question is, what about text versus WhatsApp? Can you talk a little bit about that? Because you did mention that a bit earlier. I showed us an image or something.
Yeah. So most people in the United States who are buying ESL are on SMS. They're not on WhatsApp. Most of the people who are taking ESL are on WhatsApp. So that's your answer. WhatsApp has 3 billion users worldwide, but most of them are outside of the US. And so most of your students will be very familiar with that platform, and I would recommend using that as your mechanism for communicating with them. WhatsApp's also lovely because you can create groups, which I love. It supports audio really beautifully. So you can send an audio file to students, which we all know is important. So we used WhatsApp primarily in the early days of ESL Works when it came to our students. When it came to me communicating with chefs, I always sent them a regular text message because none of them were on WhatsApp. And it's still the case. It's just like, it's two totally different worlds.
So they're not really worried about the data usage or any of that.
No, and you know, most people, at least what we're finding at Opus, most people are on unlimited plans, and the people who are not are using WhatsApp, and it tends to be our students. So,
which leads me to my next question. When you say you train on, I think Monica had asked this question somewhere. Very interested to find out, how would you train people, even now at Opus, on text messaging or WhatsApping? How do you do that?
So it's an interactive chat interface. So basically the way that Opus works is that a customer, let's say McDonald's, is given a learning dashboard where they can build a chat that includes a series of questions, answers, media that build over the course of a lesson. We have some parameters on it. It's a really fancy product now. But in the early days of ESL Works, what we did is we sent a video to users. I just shot my own video on FaceTime. And then we followed it up with a little Google form that I turned into a little quiz. So that was what a lesson was on ESL Works. It was, I'm going to send you a video and I will send you a quiz and you complete it and you'll get feedback. The great thing about Google Forms is that it automatically grades for you. So it was a really effective way. I recommend text message for everything. We obviously love it. But it's as simple as that. We basically, at Opus, what we did is, now we have a team, most of my team is actually engineers now, and their job is primarily to kind of tuck everything under the hood. So you don't see all of the, right? They make it look really easy for anybody to build a lesson. But for y'all, just to start, just send a video and a quiz and you'll do great.
Sounds very, I mean, you make it sound really simple, but fantastic. It's very encouraging. I'm sure we're all very encouraged. Neil Smith got back in again. He wasn't able to type a question. He wants to connect with you on LinkedIn. So there you go. Everyone hit our LinkedIn profile. I think we're just right about out of time. My last question was about upscaling. How often do you think about it and you get together with your team and think about the next thing that you want to do with your brand?
Oh, all the time. Yeah, all the time. But all of those conversations include what we're doing, but more importantly, what we're not doing. It's really easy. And I know everyone here is, you're going to get excited about everything. Think big about one thing and go really, really big. So every time we're talking about scaling, it's always, okay, well, all of these people really want us to develop digital checklists. Well, that's not what we do right now. So we're going to stick with training, and we're just going to make training so much better.
I love that. And on that note, I think we'll end. And thank you so very, very much, Renee.
You're welcome. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, absolutely, Rachel. We'll have you again. And thank you all for listening, and let's connect.
Absolutely. Yeah, you can all follow me on LinkedIn. You can connect with me on LinkedIn. I'm happy to chat there.
Thanks, Rachel. Thank you again. Thank you, everyone, for attending. Bye.
Bye.